right, trying something new here where I basically put the description and fill all that out first so you don't have to waste time watching me kind of updating it as I go. I can just kind of keep on moving subject to subject, create a structure and outline for what I need to do, and then whatever I don't get to is copy and paste into the next video, but try my best to chip away at everything, and I have it set up where it should be manageable, where it's about 3 to 4 tasks each. Right now I have 4 for managerial accounting, 4 for interpersonal communication, and 4 for the Holy Bible, at least different 4 passages from there. And then 3 right now for the Conglomerate and Coalescence, just because I know 2 of those at least are a little bit longer notes. And then however much time that takes, I'll aim for an hour, 2 hours at minimum. Hour definitely minimum, and then 2 hours, possibly 3 hours. I'm not sure how long it'll take, but we'll see. Kind of a trial here, being a little experimental, but we'll see how that works out. So start off with the passage from the Bible. Task number 1. As I'm reading, I'm gonna like spit that out. I'm gonna come out flying onto my computer or something. So, all right. Chicle. All right, picking up on page 27 of the New American Bible, the Gospel of John. The Gospel, which is not synoptic, which sees the material from a different point of view, is the Gospel of John. It was probably written around 90 AD and was produced by a community founded by the beloved disciple. It emphasizes the divinity of Jesus, who is in charge at all times, even during his passion and death. The cross is Jesus's hour of glory, that moment when Jesus most clearly reveals how much God loves us. The gospel is filled with intense symbolism, so much so that St. Augustine once said it was shallow enough for a child to play in and profound enough for an elephant to swim in. Sorry. Oof. All right. Next is other Johannine writings. The 3 letters of John are products of this same community, although probably not the same author. They speak of the fact that Jesus was truly human and truly divine, thus attacking Docetism or Docetism, a heresy which denied that God could have taken on our human flesh. Finally, the book of Revelation is attributed to John. Written around 96 AD, it is the only entirely apocalyptic book in the New Testament Canon. It speaks of the need to give witness to Jesus and his word while we wait the fulfillment of history and the end of times. Pick that back up on the New Testament Canon. All right, I need to read some of the Managerial. Chapter 20, Applying Overhead to Work in Process. Companies use predetermined overhead rates to apply overhead. These rates are estimated at the beginning of a period and used to apply overhead during the period. So they are estimated at the beginning of the period and used to apply overhead during the period as well. This is important for process costing, where goods are transferred across departments before the entire production process is complete. Factory overhead is applied to process using activity bases such as direct labor or machine hours. Aeroline 7, we're still kind of continuing off of something we started yesterday or the day before. Aeroline 7 in Exhibit 20.12 shows factory overhead applied to the 2 production departments. Gen X applies overhead using a predetermined rate of 120% of direct labor costs in Exhibit 20.14. Exhibit 20.14, applying factory overhead. We have the production department category. We have roasting and blending, and then a total for those 2. Under direct labor costs for roasting is $171,000. For blending, it is $183,160. The predetermined overhead rate for roasting is 120%, and the predetermined rate for blending is 120. For overhead applied, we have The roasting department, you take 171,000 times that 120% or 1.2, which gives you 205,200. For blending, we have 183,160 in direct labor costs times 120% or 1.2, which is 219,792 for a grand total of overhead applied, which is 424,992. Gen X records applied overhead with this entry. There is a debit to work in process inventory for roasting of, I don't need to mention the numbers, those are arbitrary. Work in process inventory for roasting is debited. Work in process for inventory for blending is debited. Factory overhead is credited for the sum of the roasting and blending department work in process inventory. So factory overhead is credited. And this is to represent the applied overhead at 120% of direct labor. Gen X's applied and actual overhead both equal 424,902. So no period and closing entry for factory overhead is recorded. If actual overhead is more than applied overhead, we debit the cost of goods sold and credit factory overhead for the difference. If applied overhead is less than actual overhead, we debit factory overhead and credit the cost of goods sold for the difference. Decision ethics from entrepreneur. All right, so stepping in the shoes of an entrepreneur, like my shoes. Your company makes similar products for 3 different customers. One customer demands 100% quality inspection of products at your location before shipping. The added costs of that inspection are allocated to all 3 customers. If you charge the customer the cost of 100% quality inspection, you could lose that customer. Your other 2 customers do not question the amounts they pay. What actions, if any, do you take? By allocating the added quality related costs across 3 customers, the price you charge is lower for the customer that demands the 100% quality inspection. You recover much of the added costs from the other 2 customers. This act likely breaches the trust placed by the other 2 customers. So you should consider renegotiating the pricing and or quality test agreement with this one customer at the risk of losing this customer. Need to know overhead rate and costs.
Tower Manufacturing applies overhead based on machine hours. Tower estimates it will incur $200,000 of total overhead costs and use 10,000 machine hours this year. During February, the fabricating department used 425 machine hours, and the assembly department used 375 machine hours. In addition, Tower incurred actual overhead costs as follows during February. Indirect materials, $1,800, indirect labor, $5,700, depreciation on factory equipment, $8,000, and factory utilities, $500. Number 1, compute the predetermined overhead rate. The predetermined overhead rate is calculated by taking estimated overhead costs and dividing by an estimated activity base, the activity that most closely drives overhead costs. Tower Manufacturing applies overhead based on machine hours. $200,000 in estimated overhead costs divided by an estimated 10,000 machine hours is an overhead rate of $20 per machine hour. Number 2, prepare journal entries to record overhead applied for the fabricating department and the assembly department for February and actual overhead costs incurred during February for indirect materials, indirect labor, and other overhead. The fabricating department is charged $20 per machine hour for each of the 425 machine hours used, $8,500 of applied overhead. The assembly department is charged $20 per machine hour for each of the 375 machine hours used, $7,500 of applied overhead. The factory overhead account is debited for actual overhead incurred and credited for the amount of overhead applied to production. The journal entry to apply overhead is a debit to work in process inventory fabricating, $8,500, a debit to work in process inventory assembly, $7,500, and a credit to factory overhead for the total, $16,000. Next, we record the actual overhead costs, all of which must be debited to factory overhead. To record the usage of indirect materials, we debit factory overhead and credit raw materials inventory. To record the usage of indirect labor, we debit factory overhead and credit factory wages payable. To record the other overhead items, we debit factory overhead and credit accumulated depreciation on the factory equipment and utilities payable.
I'm going to read that over just to make sure I kind of got a little good grasp of it. So Tower MFG applies overhead based on machine hours. Tower estimates that it will incur $20,000 of total overhead costs and use 10,000 machine hours this year. During February, the fabricating department used 425 machine hours and the assembly department used 375 machine hours. In addition, Tower incurred actual overhead costs as follows during February. Indirect materials were $1,800. Indirect labor is $5,700. Depreciation on factory equipment is $8,000, and utilities payable is $500. First, compute the predetermined overhead rate. Two, prepare journal entries to record A, overhead applied for the fabricating department and the assembly department for February, and B, actual overhead costs incurred during February for indirect materials, indirect labor, and other overhead. A solution for part one, the predetermined overhead rate equals estimated overhead costs divided by estimated activity base. So overhead costs, that's $200,000 of total overhead costs, estimated overhead costs. Yeah, estimates the will incur costs. So it's estimated total overhead costs of $200,000. Then divide that by the estimated activity base. So divided by 425 plus 375, which is 800. Sorry, it's that 10,000 machine hours. So, okay, so it's all the estimated stuff. So 200,000 divided by the 10,000 machine hours, which is $20 per machine hour. For 2A, we debit work in process inventory for fabricating, $8,500. Work in process inventory for assembly, $7,500. That's right. Okay, so indirect materials, indirect labor. That's process, so work in process inventory fabricating, and then depreciation, utilities payable, 8,000 plus 5,000, 8,500. Okay, that's where we get those numbers from. So work in process, all right, go back to it. Work in process inventory for fabricating debited, work in process inventory for assembly debited, and credited for the sum of those two amounts is factory overhead. Applied overhead, this is to represent applied overhead at $20 per machine hour. For part 2B, factory overhead is debited $1,800. Raw materials inventory is credited for $1,800. This is to record indirect materials used. Factory overhead is $5,700. Factory wages payable is $5,700. Factory overhead is debited, while factory wages payable is credited. This is to record indirect labor used. Factory overhead is debited for $8,500, and accumulated depreciation on factory equipment is debited for $8,000, while utilities payable is debited for credited. Did I say debited or credited? Sorry. Accumulated depreciation on factory equipment is credited for $8,000, as well as utilities payable, which is credited for $500 to get the to equal the factory overhead of $8,500. Balance the accounting equation. And accounting for transfers. Record the transfer of goods across departments to finished goods inventory and to cost of goods sold. Transfers across departments. Arrow line 8 in Exhibit 20.12 shows the transfer of partially completed units from roasting to blending. The production cost report for the roasting department in Exhibit 20.11 shows that the 100,000 units transferred to the blending department are assigned a cost of $762,000. The entry to record this transfer follows. We would debit work in process inventory for blending, $762,000, and then move that into work in process inventory for roasting of $762,000. So we're just moving it from the blending work in process inventory account for blending to work in process inventory for roasting. So moving it from blending department to the roasting department. This is to represent the transferred units from roasting to blending. All right. Assets equals liabilities plus equity. Units and costs transferred out of the roasting department are transferred into the blending department. Exhibit 20.15 shows the transfer using T accounts for the separate work in process inventory accounts, first in units and then in dollars. All right, Exhibit 20.15, transfers using T accounts. All right, so first section up top is the units. So from work in process inventory for the roasting department in units, we have a beginning of 30,000 units. We started started working on another 90,000 units for a subtotal of 120,000 units. The 100,000 units that are transferred into the blending department. And so 100,000 units of those, I know, so there's 120,000 units that are either started or completed. So we have being processed. 100,000 of those were finished enough, not finished completely, but partially completed enough to be transferred to the next department. So 100,000 of those units were transferred to blending. Blending had a beginning unit count of 12,000 at the beginning of the period. We add the 100,000 units transferred from roasting for a subtotal of 112,000 units. And then we end the period with 15,000 units remaining in the blending department. So out of those, so we have 112,000 units minus 15,000 units. And then so that gives us 97,000 units that are available to be transferred or that are finally finished and completed, ready to be transferred to finished goods inventory. So for the dollar amounts for work in process inventory for the roasting department, we have a beginning balance of $189,900. Direct materials costs were $279,000 and conversion costs were $376,200. This gives us a subtotal of $845,100. We subtract the ending remaining of $83,100 to give us 762,000 units transferred into blending. Moving over to the blending department, we have the work in process inventory for that. The beginning amount in the period was $151,688. We have the $762,000 from transferred from the roasting department added to that, which gives us, hold on, okay, so add that and then also add direct materials, which were 102,000. Conversion costs, which are 402,952 for a subtotal of 1,418,640. And then out of that, so we have an ending balance of 155,700. Subtract that from the 1.4 million. That gives us 1,262,940 units transferred to, or dollars transferred to finished goods. We see that the blending department began the month with 12,000 units in beginning inventory with a cost of $151,688. Then 100,000 units and costs of $762,000 are transferred to the blending department from the roasting department. The blending department adds direct materials costs of $102,000 and conversion costs of $402,952 during the month. I'll go ahead and keep going up until computing to cost of goods sold. So one more little section here is just like a couple sentences. So I'll go ahead and read that. Transfer to finished goods. Arrow line 9 in Exhibit 12.12 shows the transfer of units and costs from the blending department to finished goods inventory. The blending department transferred 97,000 completed units along with costs of $1,262,940 to finished goods. The entry to record this transfer follows. And then we'll pick up on that in the computing cost of goods sold section, likely on the next video. So that's fine. Yeah, good timing. McGraw-Hill, it's really annoying when you keep on having that pop-up saying like, hey, like, are you still active when I'm literally scrolling or right in the, it even popped up when I was in the middle of watching a video too. It's like kind of weird. And should be fixed, but anyway, I'm not gonna get into that. To interpersonal communications. Transfer over to chapter 3, pick up on common humanality. Common humanality. Or sorry, oh my God, I don't know how to read. Common humanity. Common humanity. The second factor of self-compassion is common humanity, or seeing one's experiences as part of the larger human experience rather than seeing them as separate and isolating. As Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer realize, we're all flawed works in progress. No one is perfect. No one is ever perfect. We all make mistakes, some big, some small. We're also all going to experience pain and suffering in our lives. Being self-compassionate means approaching this pain and suffering with an open mind, seeing it for what it is, a natural part of being human. The pain I feel in difficult times is the same pain you feel in difficult times. The circumstances are different, the degree of pain is different, but the basic experience of human suffering is the same. Mindfulness. The factor of self-compassion is mindfulness. Although Neff defines mindfulness in the same terms we've been discussing in this text, she specifically addresses mindfulness as a factor in pain, defining it with regard to self-compassion as holding one's painful thoughts and feelings in balanced awareness rather than over-identifying with them. Essentially, Neff argues that mindfulness is an essential part of self-compassion because we must recognize and acknowledge when we're suffering so we can respond with compassion to ourselves. Don't feed the vulture. One area that we know can hurt someone's self-esteem is what Sidney Simon calls vulture statements. According to Simon, vulture is a noun. 1, any of various large birds of prey that are related to the haws, eagles, and falcons, but with the head usually naked of feathers and that subsist chiefly or entirely on dead flesh. Unfortunately, all of us have vultures circling our heads or just sitting on our shoulders. In figure 3.5, we see a young woman feeding an apple to her vulture. This apple represents all of the negative things we say about ourselves during a day. Many of us spend our entire days feeding our vultures with self-deprecating negative thoughts and statements. Admittedly, I was thinking the vulture meant like you're picking away at your body, like it's eating away at you, like not you having an apple. Like it's like literally picking at your brain and eating away at you. It's like you're basically like these negative statements like eat away at you and like tear you apart. I think it might have like kind of made it more PG for the textbook, but I kind of like my analogy more. Metaphor. Many of us spend our time feeding the vultures, self-deprecating negative thoughts and statements. Admittedly, these negative thoughts come from only one place. They grow out of other people's criticisms, from the negative responses to what we do and say and the way we act on. What? They grow out of other people's criticisms, from the negative responses to what we do and say and the way we act. Okay. We have the choice to either let these thoughts consume us or fight them. According to Virginia Richmond, Jason Wrench, and Joan Gorham, the following are characteristic statements that vultures wait to hear so they can feed. The book says the apple, but I say on us, like it eats you up and it tears you apart, and it's like picking at you like it's annoying. Detriment. All right, some example Vulture statements. Oh boy, do I look awful today. I look like I've been up all night. Oh, this is going to be an awful day. It's going to be so dreadful. Another one is, I've already messed up. I left my students' graded exams at home. Or, boy, I should never have gotten out of bed this morning. Or, gee whiz, I did an awful job of teaching that unit. Or, why can't I do things as well as Mr. Smith next door? Or, why am I always so dumb? I can't believe I'm a teacher. Why? I have the mentality of a worm. Another one is, I don't know why I ever thought I could teach. A lot of people having like imposter syndrome here. I can't get anything right. Or, good grief, what am I doing here? Why didn't I select any easy job? I'm going nowhere, doing nothing. I'm a failure at teaching. In fact, I am a failure in most things I attempt. Wah, wah, wah. That's bullshit. Don't think that. All right, do any of these Vulture statements sound familiar to you? If you're like us, I'm sure they do. Part of self-compassion is learning to recognize these Vulture statements when they appear in our minds and evaluate them critically. Ben Martin proposes 4 ways to challenge Vulture statements. In other words, negative self-talk. Vulture statements, aka negative self-talk. First is reality testing. Ask yourselves, what is my evidence for and against my thinking? Are my thoughts factual or are they just my interpretations? Am I jumping to negative conclusions? How can I find out if my thoughts are actually true? 2, look for alternative explanations. Are there any other ways that I could look at this situation? What else could this mean? If I were being positive, how would I perceive this situation? 3, putting it in perspective. Is this situation as bad as I'm making it out to be? What is the worst thing that could happen? How likely is it? What is the best thing that could happen? What is most likely to happen? Is there anything good about this situation? And will this matter in 5 years? 4, using goal-directed thinking. Is thinking this way helping me to feel good or achieve my goals? What can I do that will help me solve the problem? Is there something I can learn from this situation to help me do it better next time? So the next time those vultures circle you, check that negative self-talk. We can stop these patterns of negativity toward ourselves and practice self-compassion. We can begin to pluck the feathers of the vultures. The more we treat ourselves with self-compassion and work against those vulture statements, the smaller and smaller those vultures get. Our vultures may never die, but we can make them much, much smaller. All right. Their statements, I'm useless. God, I'm ugly. Life is meaningless. Everyone hates me. Why do I even bother? I'm always going to fail like I always do. Nobody likes me. I'm an idiot. I'm a bad person. I'll never be enough. I'm nothing. Inconsequential. Yeah, when you're in the moment, you're feeling it, it hurts. But when you look back on it and you realize like your thought process, you're like, why was I so dumb? Anyway, people grow, people learn. Figure 3.6, don't feed the vulture. For the research spotlight in 2018, Laura Humphrey and John Sherblom explain the relationship between social communication competence, self-compassion, and hope. The goal of the study was to see if someone's social communication competence could predict their ability to engage in self-compassion. Ultimately, the researchers found individuals who engaged in socially competent communication behaviors found that individuals who engage in socially competent communication behaviors were more likely to engage in self-compassion, which suggests that a person who can learn to speak with others competently, initiate conversations, engage others in social interaction, and be more outgoing while managing verbal behavior and social roles may also experience greater personal self-compassion. Key takeaways: perception is the process through which individuals select, organize, and interpret sensory information to create a meaningful picture in the world. In interpersonal communication, perception shapes how we understand others and how we respond in conversations. Our perceptions act as filters, influencing the way we receive and interpret messages. The perception process includes 3 stages: attending, or focusing on specific stimuli; organizing, or categorizing and structuring information; and interpreting, or assigning meaning based on context and prior experience. Together, these stages explain how we make sense of the people and events around us during communication. Personal experiences, emotions, cultural background, and psychological states influence how we perceive others. For example, past trauma may lead someone to interpret neutral comments as hostile, while someone in a positive emotional state may perceive ambiguous feedback more favorably. These internal filters shape the accuracy and tone of our interpersonal communication. Because perception is subjective, it can lead to misunderstandings in communication. 2 people may interpret the same message differently based on their individual internal filters and experiences. Recognizing that everyone views interactions through their own unique lens is critical to improving clarity, empathy, and effectiveness in communication. When analyzing real-world communication, applying knowledge of perception allows us to understand why people behave and respond as they do. By considering others' perspectives and perceptual influences, we can better navigate conflict, build stronger relationships, and reduce bias in our interactions. I believe that's where I was leaving off on the interpersonal communications. Damn, we're making some progress. I'm barely a half an hour right now. Cool. Little bonus section there. Cool. All right, here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the sections for the Bible here, but then I'm going to go over there, turn on some news, and then I'll type up, probably not going to really be talking out loud. I'll share it when I'm done typing it up, and then so I'll come back. I'm going to go sit over there, watch the news, type it all up, come back over here, and then give you the recap of it. All right, so we'll do so those are going to be Casanova Consultations. I'll come back. Okay, I'll come back. You'll figure that out once I get back here. So don't want to spoil it. Let's see. All right, bam. Some more scripture. The word of God. I don't know where my pen went. Oh, there it is. Found you. All right, on page 27, about halfway down, we're on, I saw leaf blue by, it was tripping me out. Okay. The New Testament Canon. Already by the end of the 2nd century AD, most of the books that we know as the New Testament were included in a list of inspired books. The books that entered the canon the latest were the letter of the Hebrews because of its uncertain authorship, and the book of Revelation because it was so unusual. There were other books written around this time which were debated but not included in the canon, for they failed to meet one or more of the 3 criteria for inclusion in the canon. These include the Pastor of Hermes, the Didache, the letter of Clement to the Corinthians, etc. Like the intertestamental books of the Old Testament, they provide a valuable insight into the beliefs of the infant Christian church. Yeah, my thing is like, why is one of the criteria that it has to be apostolic origin? Hold on. And criteria, why? So does it mean it has to come from the apostles, like Jesus' disciples? I'm like kind of confused about that. I might be like a little bit off about that, but I was kind of wondering like why does it have to come like from them and like nothing else? Like you can't add anything else to it? Like even if it's like the church, you'd think like God's still at work, like God's still active and around and very alive in the world, and performing miracles, and that's what the church believes. And why are we not adding things to the Bible like a brand new testament, the Neo Testament, or something else, the contemporary testament, or I guess that would be more like contemporary, something that's kind of like this changes with the times, but maybe not that one, but like the new Bible, that new. All right, anyway, still other books written in general a bit later were also not included, but this time because they were considered to be heretical. Among these are the Gnostic writings. Gnosticism was a heresy that denied the goodness of the material world and thus Jesus's humanity. These writings present Jesus as a divine teacher who has as little as possible to do with the created world. Many of these documents were only recently discovered, for their texts were often destroyed since the church considered them to be erroneous and even dangerous. I put a little note here is that basically like the church combating fake news? They're like, that's fake news, destroy it, burn it. Kind of like, was it Fahrenheit 451 or Fahrenheit, whatever the number is? That book where you have the people in political power like just burning books because they don't want people to learn about like the past or other ideas that people have that contradict their existing narrative. And so they try to wipe out all the information, or like the silo where people are preventing people from getting artifacts and nobody knows about them before 4 times. Yeah. They're going to try to justify their reasoning with a bunch of, what do you call it? BS. Ching. All right, the language of the New Testament. All the books of the New Testament, with the possible exception of an early collection of Aramaic sayings put together by the Apostle Matthew, were written in Greek. The particular form of Greek used was called Koine or Koine, Koine, which was the common Greek spoken by the ordinary people. These writings were intended for the simple people who constituted most of the early Christian community. Right. Go ahead and leave it up there, and we'll pick back up on page 28, the relationship between the Old Testament and the New Testament. All right, I'm gonna go over yonder and take care of some BMS. But y'all can see what I'm up to. Enjoy. Oh, I'm dressed breakfast too. I'm hungry. I've my food. You boys gotta eat. Dad's got to feast. Ah, ah. It's spicy. Oh. And alright. Okay, that's still on. All my power on the side of the house again. I wasn't using the microwave. Microwave just sucks the life out of the power on. Sure. Because I need to shut stuff off and turn it down. I don't think the labels are completely right on my thing, but I've got lights back on, so maybe. Eat. Oh crap. Okay. So I know which ones to turn on and off. So all this side of the house is electric. Hey. Bye. But shit. This song into my aesthetic heritage.
President Trump responding to reports that Iran is once again attempting to assassinate him, saying the U.S. is quote, unloaded. This is an overnight post on Truth Social where the president wrote, quote, 1,000 missiles are vodka loaded aimed at the Islamic Republic of Iran with thousands to immediately follow. Should the Iranian government act on its threat? Pronounced in many corners of the globe to assassinate or attempt to assassinate the sitting president. This case, the orders have already been given, and the U.S. military is ready, willing, and paid for a 1-year period of time, subject to extension.
Can't be big students.
Completely assassinate and destroy.
Everybody's just cold the fuck off.
Praise be.
Chill the fuck up. Everybody's sitting there clocking. Stay over.
President Trump, just for the state, as he was speaking there over at the.
They know.
He was against the. Hey, listen to that portion. Stephen Nelson from the New York Post. And I'd like you to address speculation that you were leaving Ankara not in the new Air Force One because of security concerns involving Iran. You've spoken today twice about them possibly assassinating you and possibly being successful. Did that concern have something to do?
Well, I speak about it a lot because, the life of a president is very dangerous. It's 5.2%. in order to race car drivers, 1/10 of 1%. A bull rider, that looks pretty dangerous. It's 1/10 of 1%. No, it's 5.2% is you don't make it. You should have told me your excellent report. You could have told me that years ago. But it's a very dangerous profession. No, I'm number one on the kill list for Iran. They're lovely people. So I can't tell you that, but I don't really care because I'm doing a good job and I'm doing it, I hope, better than anybody's ever done it. Because we have a country that's hot and really, really successful. But I mentioned it only because it's on the list. It came out, there was another statement yesterday, and I'm number one on, I like being number one on TikTok better. But I'm number one on the list for killing.
In remarks and
First, it's
to that increase of when it goes sweaters on just days ago after which one we're going to be a threat it shifts it so there's one shooting you is close to false important CEOs who posted this just saying a U.S. official said the Iranians reached out to the administration for 2 days of skirmishes earlier this week and sought further talks to resolve the dispute. Quote, they told us that we screwed up and made a mistake. Let's keep talking. That's according to the he spoke with Daniel Rubenstein is a Middle East standing former communications advisor to Israeli Prime Ministers Netanyahu and Bennett joining us now on to talk more about the developments there in the Middle East. Thanks so much for taking the time, Daniel, to be here with us today. Thanks, Robin. And we just showed that post from President Trump there on Truth Social, where he talked about 1,000 missiles that are pointed at or those possible there. What do you make of those remarks in the way of potential plot there to once again to assassinate President Trump? It's a little bit crazy. The guardians of their these terrorists who want to report is blocking people on what they're doing. Blocking all of these things. President Trump is not serious. I'm not making that assessment about what they're doing, and it remains to be seen the patience President Trump has for violating every obligation given us. Yeah, and that's pretty much the question is what are we going to do next? Spread, all of that. Before, as I mentioned, were NCOs who essentially said that Iranian officials contacted the U.S. and basically said, sorry, shouldn't have done that. Now you're taking straight reportings of this for those who don't necessarily know these showing up. Different colors could be miracles in an interaction that are like some like you see a circle that means you see an ending. Let's say I don't people know the spread. But as we know from the US, they say that is not the case. What is the status? So just kill people. What's the big question? Should be very clear and simple when the Iranian government to stay openly and publicly straightforward to build the questions asked. The fact that you're not doing this means that it's probably not not supposed to be. They gave a anonymous statement all of the Iranian especially around the big Iranian especially very small no, the big picture is and they're on the bottom. I believe that you're able to see it. And folks out there who which is more likely next when it comes to the U.S. and Iran? Of course, the options here that negotiations pursue, military action, or lasting the days of next the both. You have to scan that QR code on the bottom right of your screen. You're just gonna hit a button there, whichever answer you want to get. There's a indicate there. Your screen in red. Daniel, what do you think? Do you think we are going to see more military action? We're going to see those incident extra? I think it's possible, but I've been following President Trump for a long time. It's been very clear. It's about the angle. The angle is the machinery and it's but the angle is very clear. Reach that. The fact that it has to reach that. And in the United States, maintaining a very strong military constitution. If I was in charge of the government in charge of the what President Trump might do, but they're not taking my advice and they're acting as President Trump. This is a post here from the foreign minister saying, well, the so far kept his word, unlike the so-called U.S. Treasury Secretary, who is violating paragraph 9 of the Memorandum of Understanding at MOU. That violation follows other violations and missteps by the United States. Reality check, there can only be mutual compliance. And I mean, it's important to note at this point that there really is no memorandum of understanding. There is no ceasefire right now, according to President Trump. So all of this is essentially, I guess you could say, arbitrary.
Yes, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the government, whoever's speaking on their behalf, they seem to think that President Trump wanted the war to end so badly that they can keep testing the limits of what is allowed or possible in the region, particularly regarding the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before this war started, and it seems like it remains closed because they are playing games with it. I don't know what's going to happen as a result of these threats, but I would be very concerned if the U.S. Navy and Air Force is on my border and saying that this is international waterway and needs to be open. I don't know what the Iranian foreign minister is talking about. It's very clear in the MOU that the Strait of Hormuz needs to be open.
We have opportunity.
I think the opportunity is for everyone.
I think we should start with
At this point, you're probably not avoiding therapy because it's stigma. You're probably avoiding therapy because you've become very good at coping.
stuff. Maybe have
Right, he's going to try to get the U.S. to meet with President Trump again. This is one of many trips that he's taken to the White House since President Trump started his second term in office. What is the current relationship like between the two? There was a lot of talk about maybe a strained relationship when Israel wasn't told essentially about the deal that was being formulated there between the U.S. and Russia. What is the status of that relationship?
I think this visit is very important, and we've been speaking a lot about words. What is the words the United States and Israel going to war together to stop the Iranian regime from developing nuclear weapons and from threatening the entire world. This cooperation continues, and it's clear the Prime Minister is making a visit to President Trump to talk about these issues privately as both allies should. I am sure that there are disagreements about timing, about tactics, but on the big picture, the United States and Israel are in line that Iran cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons capability. It should not be enriching uranium on its foot, and it needs to stop supporting the worst groups in the world, Hamas, Hezbollah, that want to see all of us dead. So the fact that the Israeli Prime Minister is making a visit to Washington, it gives me optimism. The U.S. and Israel will be coordinating their positions behind the scenes and coming up with a united front for how to deal with the threat from Iran.
But this might be over television. We talk a little bit more about the situation going there over Israel. And we saw the post a bit this morning. I am going to take that here. I believe it was coming in from Iran International English List. Give you a look at that post right now, and you can see it. Again, this is from Iran International English, and it says the IRGC affiliated Fars News Agency called Iranian strikes on the ports of Haifa in Israel as well as one in the United Arab Emirates in response to a U.S. attack on the railway bridge in. If that were to happen, if there were an attack there on the ports and pipeline in Israel, I have to imagine that Israel is going to respond in real time, and there's going to be a pretty heavy response.
Yes, I'm glad you showed the live image of Tel Aviv. I'm looking out of my window in my office right now, and I have a very similar view. It's a lovely sunny day. Imagine if the Iranian regime decided to launch missiles in the city of Tel Aviv or the port of Haifa and damage significant civilian infrastructure. I imagine the Israeli government will order a response in kind. There are many targets in Iran that the Israeli government has not ordered targeted, that President Trump is not targeted, because we've been trying to make a very clear distinction between the Iranian regime, which seeks to wipe Israel off the map, and the Iranian people who are oppressed by this regime and deserve to be free, and they should have a country that they can live in and build from after this regime falls. However, if the Iranian government is going to make the decision to destroy critical infrastructure in Israel, in the United Arab Emirates, in Bahrain, and other places, then it may be possible that the Iranian regime will face a similar response in kind, so that the economy will not be able to support the war that they continue to advocate for and to threaten until Israel is destroyed.
My last question for you here, Israel and Hezbollah, where do things stand as we look at that? There's been a lot of coverage, no doubt, about the conflict between the U.S. and Iran and Israel's role in that whole situation and Operation Epic. But you know that Hezbollah is still firing Israel. Israel is conducting strikes and operations over in Beirut as they target Hezbollah. Where do things kind of stand there?
Right now, as you mentioned, Hezbollah remains armed and dangerous inside Lebanon. This Hezbollah terrorist army is an army that operates outside the authority of the legitimate government of Lebanon. So because Hezbollah is still armed and dangerous and pointing its weapons into Israel, the Israeli military still has positions inside Lebanon. So some distance from Hezbollah's anti-tank missiles and the Israeli arms that Hezbollah shoots at. Right now, Israel is engaged in we'll call it a trial period. There are what's called pilot zones inside southern Lebanon, where the Israeli military is joined so that the legitimate government of Lebanon, the army of Lebanon, can enter these territories and disarm Hezbollah and prevent Hezbollah from returning to these areas to threaten Israel ever again. If this pilot program succeeds, meaning that the places Israel withdraws from are not filled by Hezbollah, then we could expect to see control. If the government of Lebanon cannot take control of its own territory, and an Iranian-backed militia remains in that territory with this weapon pointed at me, then we might see the status quo sustain itself for a while in some Lebanon with Israel holding positions in the south.
And the idea of the Israel Defense Forces on that note, here and under territorial chat within the security zone where IDF soldiers are reporting posing an immediate threat in a separate strike, a suspect traveling in a vehicle posed a threat to IDF soldiers operating within that security zone was also eliminated. So again, showing that basically those strikes, those I wouldn't say attacks, but basically they're eliminating those Hezbollah terrorists who were posing a threat in any way to people of Israel. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us to help me to break this all down. Is there anything there you want to make sure to add before I let you go?
I just want to thank your viewers and you for giving me the opportunity to share an important perspective from the people of Israel. And I hope our life will remain strong in the future and that this is Israel as soon as possible.
And of course, I'm sure we'll have you on again soon. Thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Shaw is hiding the truth. Shaw has sided with Republicans over and over again. Shaw was the only Democrat to vote with MAGA Republicans to block access to birth control and co-sponsored a bill to make it easy to force conversion therapy on young and gay Arizonans. It's no wonder Democrats who know it said it can't be trusted. You know that means someone we can trust. That's not Amit Shah. Old America is responsible for the content of advertising.
I'm 62 and this is day one since my daughter's convinced me to switch from. We call sitting on the couch with a mom couch. Yeah, and we made her switch to Tai Chi. Honestly, I don't think 7 minutes a day can do much, but let's see. This is me after 28 days of Tai Chi. And yesterday, my neighbor didn't even recognize me. If you want to feel exhausted and keep dealing with joint pain, do nothing. If you want to feel toned, energized, and younger, do 7 minutes of Tai Chi every morning. Everyone looks amazing on Facebook. I'm 54 and I look like a grandma. I will just cancel. Don't cancel. Do Tai Chi instead. 7 minutes a day, 1 month, and you'll walk and look better than anyone. I'm serious. That's not possible. Not only possible, it's what this was designed for. Women over 50 want their body. 1 month is actually enough time. 1 month is actually plenty of time. Your body responds faster than you think. I haven't worked out since my 20s. Perfect. That means your body's starving for movement. When will I see results? You'll see results in 2 weeks. Energy first, and strength, and everyone asking what your secret is. Just 7 minutes a day. Just 7 minutes a day. And I'll really look that different. That's what happens when women our age do this consistently. It's specifically designed for your body. How do I start? Click the link. Start tomorrow. 1 month from now, you'll own that.
This Monday, July 13th, we're starting the Tai Chi program for beginners. Build strength and lose up to 23 pounds of belly fat. With just 7 minutes a day. In 1 week, you'll feel it. In 2 weeks, you'll see it. By beach season, you'll be turning heads. Start this Monday, July 13th. You in?
So Tai Chi is one of the best ways to lose weight if you stop guessing. Most women after 50 work out randomly and hope it works. It doesn't. Weight loss through Tai Chi is math. Your weight, height, age, and goal determine exactly what exercises you need to do. That's why there's a short quiz. You answer a key question, and it gives you your personal daily plan. Want to lose 30 pounds? You get the exact set of moves and the amount of time you should spend doing that. Want to tone your body? Get another one, no floor work, no equipment needed, just a clear target that actually works. Take the quiz below and get your personalized plan to lose weight. I'll link it below. Thank you.
This summer, you'll feel connected to your body in a whole new way. All you have to do is open the app, read, and follow the flow. Your new energy and your new body start here.
I couldn't summon into this fight. You. I'm getting tough, like I don't into the team. I'm gonna show you. Oh, man.
I would imagine.
I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you. Oh, you joking about? I'm gonna show you. Oh, man.
You can beat cancer and still lose everything. Or you can have a little known policy that puts up to $400,000 in your pocket if you're ever diagnosed with cancer, heart attack, or both.
Wait a minute. Into they literally mean the same thing.
With planning for the midterm elections well underway, President Trump has ousted the remaining members of a bipartisan federal agency. Is 8:50 on the East Coast and 5:50 on the West Coast, and as we get right back in your headlines on this Saturday.
And of course, you can see video there of Ryan here at their thin age of deathbed story that's been all over social media. A terrifying situation that happened mid-air as passengers aboard a flight from northern Greece and Germany had to pull back a man who was partially sucked out of a broken airplane window. It all happened yesterday, a few minutes after takeoff. Air, which is a subsidiary of Ryanair, which is Europe's largest budget carrier. Ryanair telling the Associated Press in a statement that, quote, a passenger window dislodged in flight, and the aircraft returned to the airport in September. The 61-year-old passenger reportedly suffered neck and shoulder injuries along with a
She's like,
something that consulting to something like this. Thank you so much, Dr. Mann, for the time that you're with us. And as I mentioned, does something like this even happen?
So understanding about injury, there's going to be a lot of agencies investigating this. What it looks like right now is that something happened with the engine. A piece of the engine broke loose, came out of the side of the engine, and basically bounced off the window. And the window shattered or dislodged. Doesn't look like any other part of the plane was damaged other than the engine and that window. And fortunately, it worked out that, the gentleman, the passenger, was partially sucked out the window, but he had a seatbelt on, and the other passenger got him inside, and the plane got back on the ground safely.
And that was my next question. Obviously, you're not crystal ball or anything of that nature, but talking from a safety perspective, if he had not been, I guess, wearing his seatbelt, could this have been a different situation?
Yeah, there's, obviously a lot of physics involved, but absolutely, it could have potentially been a different thing. My understanding from the reporting I've read is that his head and shoulders were completely out the window. So, generally the widest parts of our body, so there probably wasn't a whole lot left to keep him in. So him wearing a seatbelt was probably the single biggest contributor to him staying in the airplane.
How does all of this kind of plays out? The engine, a piece of the engine it appears. So what is that? Is that something that is, I can imagine, fairly rare?
Yeah, it is extremely rare. It's not unprecedented. There's a similar incident that happened back in 2018, I believe with Southwest Airlines, same, very, very, very similar aircraft, 737 with the same type of engine in it. And this is normally something from an engine that's got some wear and tear. And what will happen is the investigators will look to find out what the definitive cause is with their metallurgy and whatnot, and find out if that means that these engines need to be replaced or inspected more often. And then, and unique to aviation is whatever they find with this, it will propagate globally. Aviation is the only industry that requires the country that designed it, the country that built it, and the country that owns it, the country that operates it, and the place for it to all coordinate together. They, by treaty, have to coordinate together. And then in the civil aviation structure for regulatory purposes, anything that gets put out there is mandatory. It's not if your company feels like doing it, it's you do this or you don't fly. And aviation does that very quickly. So whatever they come up with, whatever they investigate, it's going to involve all interested parties, and it's going to get to a correction that's going to be issued globally.
That note here said globally, so I have to imagine, despite the fact that this doesn't involve the U.S., we're talking about specifically the largest budget carrier there for Europe, Ryanair. Of course, Malta Air is a subsidiary there. But would this have an impact then, I imagine, on the U.S.? They would have to take part in changing whatever is decided.
Oh, absolutely. And the U.S. is required to participate. The NTSB is required because, while the plane was operated by Ryanair in Europe, it was being flown in Europe. It was run with the European crew, presumably. The plane was manufactured and designed in the United States. Therefore, the U.S. has to participate. The engine manufacturer, I believe, is also in the United States, so they have to participate. And if through treaties and agreements, if something is found
that's defective and needs more inspections or whatever it is, the U.S. will have to comply with it or will have to issue a legally binding declaration to the International Civil Aviation Authority explaining why they're doing better.
And of course, you are an aviation expert, so I want to get your take. What question or questions do you have that you hope an investigation could potentially answer? Domino's best deal ever just got better. Space stuff first.
So close to 50%. And sexual and also a danger. I ended up getting some bar stools and nightstands. Yeah. Table and side table.
Just so comfortable. We thought about it now.
The area, the presentation is different, the feel is different, and the layout is different. You have to just not worth going anywhere else. It's here and they'll take you.
Living spaces.
Surgery. He didn't only have to fight for his life, he also had to fight his insurance companies to get the coverage he deserved. Now, with clarity and purpose, Jonathan's running for Congress to stop Donald Trump's assault on our healthcare system, Trump's assault on immigrant communities, and Trump's assault on the middle class. That's why Jonathan is fighting for Medicare for all, to get us the healthcare we all deserve.
Where the problem is. I'm interested in is there a necessary change that needs to be made to the engines so that because these engines do have kind of it's oversimplifying, but they have kind of a sleeve on the inside that's supposed to keep all the pieces from falling out if the engine does shatter during flight. And it appears to be that there's evidently a gap somewhere in there. It's probably a small gap given that the fan blades came apart, and as far as I've seen so far, only this window was touched. Like nothing on the right or left, top or bottom of it, nothing else was touched. I'm interested to know, is it some maintenance issue with the window? Because it's notably not affected the structure of the airplane as far as anybody's been able to detect so far. So it's basically just an engine issue, or there's an issue with how the window is performed. And then you want to know also, is it a design problem, or was it something that was the air carrier and a maintenance problem? So basically just figuring out what needs to be fixed so this doesn't happen again. But this is exceedingly rare. The last most similar thing was 8 years ago, and it's or 12 a long time ago, 2018. But the last most similar thing was 2018. And if you think about the millions and millions and millions of flights that have happened in between there, that it's an excessively rare event anyway.
Yeah, and we're looking at some of the pictures that we've seen, the New York Post sharing some of those. And I want to pop this one up on your screen here. I showed it just a second ago, but as we popped it up, you can see the window itself that was broken there, again, hit by what appears to be a piece of the engine, all of this under investigation. And I'm going to ask, as far as transparency goes, once there are some answers about what happened, how it happened, whether there is a threat to any other aircraft here, how does the transparency work with essentially informing the public and letting them know? I have to imagine that all of this is public record and is going to be released to the public.
Well, absolutely. The findings of the International Civil Aviation Authorities, the ICAO folks, that has to be public by law, and that has to be public by treaty. So anything that's found will be made public. Any actions that are required, such as corrective actions at the design stage, the maintenance stage, the operational stage, anything has to be done there, will be done very, very, very quickly and will be mandatory. The aviation is very unique in this way that it is as close as we have. It's not perfect, but it's very, very, very close to anything that would resemble a global authority that all plays together under harmonious rules, and that a rule in one place is a rule somewhere else, and it all is intended to work together. And it kind of just makes sense because unlike automotive or rail or anything else, a plane that's flown in Greece today could be in New York by the afternoon. It could be in Japan later the next day. And so all of those places have to have a very, very quick action on any kind of safety items and any kind of things. And it has to be very clear of political barriers and stuff like that. Aviation does this very.
Folks who work for the airline have to be trained on a variety of scenarios and situations. Is this one that is likely trained for in any way? So again, it's not something you hear about every day.
Yeah, the air crews are trained on a loss of cabin pressure, and if you think about the last time you flew, all the passengers are briefed on the loss of cabin pressure. If the loss of pressure or mass falls down, you hear the briefing every time you fly. If you fly enough, it kind of goes in the background, but it is something that you lost the cabin pressure, which is what happens when a window pops out and the pressure inside drops and the oxygen down. That is trained for all the time. Pilots train for the simulator. They will get the alerts in the cockpit. They will put their masks on. They will bring the plane to a lower elevation, or if there's automation involved, the automation will do it. That depends on the airframe, but it is the loss of pressure element is very, very, very heavily reinforced and heavily trained. Now, to say, is it this specific window that falls out? Probably not. But any kind of similar scenarios is very, very heavily trained and very because the response time has to be immediate, so they keep reinforcing it until the crews get it perfect. And so that's partially why the response getting back to the lower altitude all that was so quick. And the plane took, I believe it was like 20 minutes from the time the window came out. It was about 20 minutes till they were on the ground again, which is very, very fast.
That has to be a terrifying situation, not just for the passengers on board, but the crew, pilots as well, as you're seeing this. And it's, again, not something you see every day. So definitely a scary situation there. Dr. Philip Mann, thank you so much for being here with us and helping to discuss this further. Hopefully, we never have you on again to discuss anything like this. But is there anything that you want to add? Anything that we missed before I let you go?
Well, I don't think it's missed. I guess it's just that we emphasized several times this is an exceedingly rare event. The passenger is wearing a seatbelt. You're always holding your plane to wear your seatbelt when you're in your seat, so do that. But don't, flying public doesn't need to worry about picking a window seat versus picking an aisle seat. That's not going to have any real effect here. With as rare as this is, I suspect you could probably fly every day and you could sit in a window seat every single day, and it would take you several lifetimes before you're statistically likely to run into the same situation again. So just flying is safe, assume flying is safe, and any event like this is so rare that it's not really worth altering your life over.
Dr. Philip Mann, aviation expert and principal consultant at Vector Strategic Consulting. Thank you so much for being here with us and helping to discuss it. We appreciate it.
Sure thing. Take care.
Finding a therapist you actually connect with can feel like a lot to ask, but 82% of BetterHelp members say they recommend their therapist to someone else. That's how many people feel genuinely understood by their therapist. That's what BetterHelp is built around. You answer a few questions, get matched with a qualified therapist, and start talking however works for you, video, phone, or chat. A lot of members are trying therapy for the first time, and having a therapist who actually understands what you're going through makes more of a difference than you'd expect. Get started with BetterHelp.
Hey, Ryan Owens here from Mint Mobile with a very exciting announcement for parents everywhere. It's called Mint Kids. It's a plan specifically designed for kids just getting their first phones.
It's a full-size plan for your mini me.
Like that.
Well, it's unlimited talk and text, 5 gigabytes a day. So I can't get in too much trouble, right, Big Ryan?
See, this is the kind of stuff that I don't want my kids seeing online.
Upsy?
No.
Upsy?
Please don't.
Upsy.
Terrifying picture.
When the sun comes out, so should your skin. European Wax Center. Smooth, done right.
So let's look at first today.
Sectional and also a dining room. I ended up getting some bar stools and nice fans. Table and a side table. The area, the constitution is different, the feel is different, the layout is different, and yours is a bigger selection. It's not worth going anywhere else. Things come here and they'll take care of you.
Living spaces.
Need to break down. Somebody have to stop it.
With planning for the midterm elections well underway, President Trump has asked the remaining members of a bipartisan federal agency to help state and local officials run smooth elections and certify voting equipment. Our White House correspondent Liz Landers is here to explain what happened at the Election Assistance Commission and the impact it could have. So Liz, who was pushed out, and how is the White House explaining this?
The three remaining commissioners there at the PTAC were pushed out yesterday. Thomas Hicks, who was the chairman, he is a Democrat. Also, Benjamin Baldwin, he was also a Democrat appointed to the commission. And then one Republican who apparently resigned under pressure, Steve Foreman, have all left. The first commissioner had already left at that point. So there is no one on the EAC right now that is a confirmed commissioner. VoteBeat reports that last night, these commissioners, the two who were dismissed, received an email telling them that they were being pushed out, and it was signed by someone from the White House. We've not heard directly from the president on this, but I did email the White House yesterday asking for comment about this. A White House official told me in a statement that the president has the authority to fire people that, quote, may not be totally aligned with the important task of securing America's elections and ensuring every legal vote is counted. And interestingly, Jeff, the White House pointed to a recent Supreme Court decision, the Slaughter decision, which tests the limits of the president's ability to fire independent agency heads. He was allowed to fire this FTC commissioner, Rebecca Slaughter, but Lisa Cook, a member of the Federal Reserve Board, does remain in her job. So if one of these terminated members of this board were to sue, there might be an uncharted legal territory.
So the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, I think it's fair to say most people did not know it existed until the White House fired the remaining commissioners. What exactly does it do?
This commission does not have any confirmed commissioners at this point, so they can't act. But as David Becker earlier today, he's the executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and he said that the EAC doesn't really have much control over anything. They have kind of three main areas and tasks that they do. They create, alongside election officials, a voluntary voting systems guideline to certify voting equipment. But again, that's voluntary. Not all states participate. They give grant money when appropriated by Congress, and then they administer a election voting administration survey every 2 years.
How concerned are state election officials about all of these changes?
One Republican that I spoke to was not very concerned. This person pointed out that because the EAC does not have any governing authority, they were not that worried about this decision. I also spoke though with Tobias Reed, he's the Democratic Secretary of State of Oregon. He called these firings irresponsible and reckless. And I asked how this treats the effect of elections.
I think it remains to be seen. You just said you're prepared to step into that gap. I think it also really underscores how important it is for the president to, if he wanted to really make a difference in elections, he would go to a whole range of other things. The president would restore the funding to the agency that is responsible for protecting our elections from foreign influence, society, as it chosen. You could make it easier for more people to have the access that Oregonians do to paper, mail in ballots. If the president was serious about this, we focused on that instead of just kind of see.
And these firings aren't happening in a vacuum, too, although President Trump has been laser focused on trying to change how elections at the state level are administered in this country.
He's put pressure on various parts of the government and also use presidential power and authority, which the courts, I would add, have pushed back on throughout the last year or so. I think our audience will remember that the Director of National Intelligence went to Fulton County to investigate the election there from 2020. It still has no proof of substantial voter fraud there. The Department of Justice keeps losing challenges to their requests for personal data and voter rolls. There are executive orders about mail-in ballots that the president has signed, and courts keep telling him that he does not have authority over election administration in this country. And then he has also put pressure on Congress recently on that Safe America Act, a sweeping voting piece of legislation. So for years now that he's been elected, he's been talking about election fraud, which is incredibly rare in this country, Jeff. This is a solution without.
Thanks so much for the support. Appreciate it.
Support journalism you trust. Support PBS News.
Donate now, or even better, start a monthly contribution today. This is what that means. $100 pounds. When the price of a barrel of oil goes up, gas prices usually go up. But it's not a one-to-one match. About 50% of what you pay at the pump is not included. So what's really driving that number? Why are we seeing oil prices go up? The U.S. is such a big oil producer. I'm Steve Ballmer. This is just the balance. Maybe true facts about you make up your own. This episode, the price of oil. Let's break this down. What a barrel of oil actually is, how much oil the world and the U.S. uses, and why something happened 5,000 miles away, like the Strait of Hormuz, can hit the wall. First, what is a barrel of oil? It's just a unit of measurement. It dates back to the 1860s. Oil in Pennsylvania, when producers used little barrels, often whiskey stores were. The problem was they weren't all the same size, so the industry standardized it 42 gallons. The barrels themselves are mostly gone, but the measurement stuff is crazy, right? And one barrel doesn't. Gasoline is the biggest share. It's not the only. That same barrel can also produce diesel, jet fuel, heating oil, and building blocks, the plastics, fertilizers, and chemicals. So when we talk about oil prices, we're really talking about the cost of the system. So how much are we using? Globally, we use about 100 billion barrels per day. In the United States, we use about 21 billion barrels of oil per day, roughly 7.5. And here's what's surprising. U.S. consumption of oil has been relatively steady for decades, even as the economy and population grow. But prices of oil, not steady at all. They move a lot. You can see spikes tied to major global events. The Iranian Revolution. The financial crisis in 2008 and COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 collapsed. And recently, geopolitical tensions involving Iran have driven the largest price spike since 2020. So who's next? There's no single rule. Oil prices are set in global markets with trading on exchanges. Two of the biggest are the New York economies, NYMEX, and the Intercontinental Exchange, ICE. Think of these as giant marketplaces with buyers and sellers needed to agree on prices. But they're not trading.
Welcome back. Come on now from the box. There's no take about it. Down to the other 126 cents. Maybe when they get we get out like we have two. We have this problem. Change from the actually the United States. Our Trump is probably in route to the White House. White House.
You guys want a little changing environment, so. Yeah, they've always worked in the same spot. Like I said, I gotta always say, right is the spice of life. Switch it up. Yeah. Oh.
I think the only thing I had remaining on here is the conglomerate notes. Yeah. No comments or anything? But I looked at priority contacts.
This is what that means. $100. When the price of the barrel of oil goes up, gas prices usually go up. But it's not a one-to-one thing. About 50% of what you pay at the pump is tied to fuel. So what we evolve, and this is just the fact. Maybe the facts about you make up your own. So the price of oil. Let's break this down. What a barrel of oil something happening 5,000 miles away, straight into a moves and hit your wall. Just be human connection. Dates back from the industry standard on 42 gallons. Right? And one barrel doesn't gasoline is the biggest share, and it's not the only thing. That same barrel can also produce diesel, jet fuel, heating, and building blocks for plastics, fertilizers, and chemicals. So when you talk about oil prices, we're really talking about the cost of the system. So how much are we using? Globally, we use about 1,000 for the United States uses about 21 million barrels of oil per day. Roughly 70. Now it's surprising. U.S. consumption just said last night they had me in that much. So it's pretty simple. I mean, yes, they're looking at everything.
That's right. I find the emphasis. I think about this. What are you saying about some kind of points on background, so there is wouldn't say and it was standing and this is one other and it's still Spain came back all the way in. Spain was very generous. You know, so celebrate what the effect they wanted to request relations to Spain. And they didn't come. They were in my opinion. It's good unity in they don't pretty much is something very good. And it's saying, I think they did the different. It's religious unity. Together, it's violence. And lots of it depended on me. And lots of time. Very good gentlemen. They will get well. So let's get into it. What happened now? It's a little late to believe it's from the sense that it's not happening tonight. But so independent. And it's not included in how it sort of beginning. They will have so many. You know, it's things.
I'm sorry, do you want to think and love it, not mine?
It's a great job, Jacob, like so. Rest of them. Said, yeah, so it was good again. It's a lot of convenience. Sessions. Okay. We should be ready. I did, but we serve. I even back. That's what it's. Again, technically, those are the things technically against. So you have Russian against yourself.
I transfer these. I keep on doing other notes besides these, but here, let's go ahead with these.
So, less than that she won the Nobel Prize for Peace. She said, I can't believe it. Either one of the two. Actually, give her 50%. But I would say, but then more than anyone that ever received the Nobel Prize. Because nobody said, of course, that's a him.
Talk about all this peace, dude. That you're committing all this violence. It was like, I should win the Nobel Peace Prize because I did a few peaceful things or I resolved a few things, but you're just going over there. I don't want to say doing violence because that's not the right way of saying it. Committing atrocities, war crimes. It might not be legally defined as war crimes, but we need to change the definition to just, killing people is not the best solution, so. We can work on that, but yeah, you can't just do like a couple of good things and then do all this bad shit and saying like, hey, look how peaceful I am. Big orange man pissing me off. Silencio, STFU. I'll listen to him more if he wasn't so full of shit. Narrative saying everything is great and it's causing a whole bunch of fucking shit. Like I said, doing some good things, but doing a lot of bad shit too. And trying to outweigh all the bad shit he's doing, at least in the way he's talking, with like a few good things that he's doing. Like, look at all the good that we're doing. Yeah, look at all the fucking horrible shit you're doing. So we got here for Royalist Resorts, a rough draft concept here is K9 room service or hospitality helpers. Puppies or dogs are trained to become service dogs, specifically capable of serving as a butler or a maid or something to that extent. All room service animals are equipped with a modified backpack strapped to them with a special bag or a tray on top that allows them to carry things guests request and deliver those items directly to the rooms. Dogs deliver items to specific rooms. How many routes or different rooms? Oh, so this is a research question. Okay. Our dogs deliver items to specific rooms and then sit down and bark once every 10 seconds or so for about a minute in order to get the attention of the guest waiting on the other side of a locked room door. All right, and then for research, we need to look up how many routes or different rooms can a dog remember to go to. Kind of like the mice in the maze experiment. I'm kind of curious, like putting dogs in a hotel, like navigating the maze of a hotel or a resort. How many different pathways are they able to remember? And different pathways can they be instructed or directed to go to based on the given assignments? So, instructions will be provided to guests regarding how to properly interact with and treat or handle these service animals. Service animal backpacks are equipped with a video camera activated while dogs are on the job and on the clock from the time they are dispatched to the time they return. And again, the dogs can be left outside of the room. They don't need to come into your room. And so that way don't have to worry about privacy issues. So we're not like filming stuff in the room or anything. We just be outside. And it's more for the safety of the dogs, not for trying to invade privacy or look at anything people are doing. We don't really care about them. And collars. That's the thing with the whole privacy thing. Like I think people like feel self-conscious and feel like people are invading their privacy when realistically like most of the time when people look at their stuff, it's like nobody really cares what you're doing or what's going on. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter as much. But yeah, there are the little like security issues where some people are like just doing weird shit or malicious things, and you don't want that. So it's understandable why we have these guidelines to an extent, but yeah, this wouldn't be infracting on that, so or infringing upon that. So they're equipped with collars are all equipped with microphones. This holds people accountable and keeps dogs safe, preventing and deterring risks of mistreatment by guests or others. Dogs are tipped, like giving gratuity. Not like tipping a server or somebody else you're tipping, but the dog's tips are essentially treats. So when people give them a treat, this would be standard protocol. So like kind of like giving a person like a couple bucks for helping them out, like say the bellhop or something helps bring your bags to the room, then you go ahead and give them a few bucks. Versus like say the dogs, these hospitality helpers, you essentially can have like even a complimentary thing, something that's no charge to the guest or anything, just a little thing outside their door if they opt to have this, or they could even manually select in the settings like, no, I don't want this for whatever reason. So do you hate animals? I'm just kidding. It's like some people are like for sanitary reasons, they're allergic, they have allergies, or there's other reasons why this might not be applicable to everyone, but for everybody who wants to be able to have this, we can include that. But then also, yeah, have the little complimentary set of treats there. So when the dogs do come by, deliver stuff, you just have it available, boom, give the dog a treat, and then you're good to go. Viable tasks and available services that dogs are able to complete. They're capable of completing. They can bring towels or clothes to guests. They can deliver drinks and cocktails or food. Let's go ahead and make a note. So even if your people are asleep, you still got the dogs that you can ring the bell and they know what to do. And I don't know if we want to do that. You might need at least like one person kind of directing them, kind of guiding them. But again, we'll do more research to see how much the dogs are actually capable of. And I think this would be a good way of like being able to display what dogs are really capable of, like how awesome they can really be if you train them properly. Kind of a clear that proper caring and proper training of a dog can allow them to achieve like really high potential versus like compared to someone who doesn't train them or leaves them outside or doesn't treat them well and doesn't really know how to handle a dog, and how those dogs kind of unfortunately end up turning out. So there'd be a clear distinction between that. So I think it might be like kind of like a subtle unconscious lesson that we can teach people like, hey man, like you treat your dogs well, they can do a lot of cool shit. They can be happy and they can contribute a lot versus if you don't, you have no idea what you're doing, you have no business having a pet, then see how they kind of turn out. Constantly barking for no reason or biting, whatever else. But it's not bad dogs, it's just bad owners. All right. Maybe we can hire, what's his name, Caesar. Let's get that Caesar dude. At least, or maybe we can even have it on a show, like. Partner with Caesar, the celebrity dog trainer, to help market this service. Subtly indicate the huge difference or delineation between pets that receive loving and attentive care and training compared to pets with owners who neglect, mistreat, or fail to treat them properly. Encourage owners to help their pets achieve their truest and fullest potential. Work with animate trainers and services to crap, I forgot my deal. Had it. It left me as quickly as it came down. Or services to lead by example and show various animals and breeds' true potential. So work with anime trainers and services to lead by example and show the public what various animals and breeds are really capable of. Next note. Next note is for Casanova Consultations. Casanova Corp. Name I started off with. So Casanova Consultations. Agency or corporation? Incorporated agency. See how that works out. I like it to come off the tongue a little bit easier. Sound more sexy when you're speaking it. Oh. Consultations, we have the idea that monogamy is an anachronistic practice. The entire idea of monogamy is an anachronistic social construct and is not the way humans were designed and is not something nature ever intended. I mean, nature's not intelligent, but yeah, no, it's not how our biology works. It places unnecessary artificial limitations on the ability for people to proliferate or to simply pursue satisfaction. In the past, issues like scarcity and order amongst different groups of people required systems in place to uphold peace and social stability. However, these systems are no longer demanded by society to the degree they once were. In fact, in modern society, extensive research indicates that monogamy in today's society is more debilitative than facilitative, and polyamory is the most pragmatic and legitimate form of relationship. This presumption is made based on the condition that each alpha has enough baseline resources to care for his pack, and it can be a collective effort and does not need to solely rely on a single alpha. Polyamory and alpha pack is the proper relationship structure. Finally, for Casanova conflict resolution. So for Casanova consultations, we have a conflict resolution technique, one of many. If someone seems angry, upset, or irritated, extra volatile, okay, volatile, V-O-L-A, extra volatile for apparently no reason, ask them the following question or questions in a genuine and heartfelt manner. Say, okay. So just ask them, hey, are you feeling okay? It's one good one. And the other one, switch them up and put this one below that. The second one is, hey man, you good? Got that one because I remember hearing a joke one time. It was like, obviously it was a joke, but I mean, it did kind of have a good point where it's like basically a guy was walking down the street and then you have this other guy come up and try to mug him. And he's like, give me all your money, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to blast you. And then the other guy's like, you know what? I got all this stuff going on in my life, blah, 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 blah. Like, wah. And it's like he's just like depressed and sad. And he's like borderline. He's like, you know what? Just get it over with. And the robber's like pointing the gun at him. He's like, hey man, you good? I thought that was hilarious. But like at the same time, you can kind of apply that to this is something's going on. Like there's usually underlying things going on, and I feel like implementing stuff like this will be able to address a lot of the underlying, or basically address situations while taking into consideration, there are a lot of underlying issues that cause the person to get to this point to say those things, think those things, or do those things. And I think this will be a good way to kind of have a buffer. So almost being able to talk to the person, break that ice, break those barriers, but also to be able to just kind of, you know, relate to the person, kind of allow them to understand that you're open to empathy, that they can even right then off the bat see you as another person who like genuinely cares. And people are going to be typically be more hesitant to hurt someone or try to do something that might lead to harm, emotional, physical, and so on, to a person that they feel genuinely cares about them. So I think this would, one, be able to serve as a deterrent, and then two, promote empathy, three, understanding. It's kind of the same, similar thing, similar concept, but just to be able to kind of diffuse situations, I think, a lot. To be able to kind of calm people down, rein them in, kind of bring them back into reality, instead of like having them stuck in their own heads, ruminating on all these like toxic thoughts and whatnot. We can go ahead and try to, you know, move forward more productively. So we got that there, and I think we're wrapped up with all the tests that we had for this video. Casanova consultations, conflict resolution technique. So here, let's do a recap real quick. Probably be a good idea. So you can just recap what we've covered. So objectives for July 11th, 2026. First, we had, well, this obviously the timestamps are kind of all over the place. I was jumping around, but we had the Conglomerate and Coalescence note transfers for Casanova consultations, conflict resolution technique. Casanova consultations, monogamy is an anachronistic practice. Mainly because I changed the title on the laptop, so go ahead and keep it consistent. Royalist resorts, canine hospitality helpers. Second, we had managerial accounting, chapter 20, applying overhead to work in process, decision ethics, a video need to know for overhead rate and costs, accounting for transfers and transfer to finished goods. For interpersonal communications, chapter 3, we covered common humanity, mindfulness, don't feed the vulture, so not feeding the vulture, and research spotlight, as well as key takeaways. And then for the Holy Bible, the New American Bible, we covered the Gospel of John, other Johannine writings, the New Testament Canon, and the language of the New Testament. And then for other miscellaneous tasks, I went ahead and sorted a priority contacts list. One of the extra things I did over there. And we are done. Check, 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 and check. Check, 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 check the technique. All right, there we go. All right, we're wrapped up with that. I'm going to take a little bit of a break and come back. So real quick break. I don't feel like I needed like a huge break. I'm not super tired. Kind of want to stay in the flow. Got a little flow state going here. So I'll just take some time to kind of organize some things. And so I might not really take a break. Just go ahead and type some stuff up over there and then come back and, you know, do that on my own real quick and then come back and start another video. So, all right, and this one, y'all take care, and I'll see you in the next one.